There are many people today who would identify themselves as being spiritual, but not religious. And across North America, the religious landscape is shifting quite a bit. People are losing interest in institutional religion, but the interest in spirituality is on the rise. It's increasing. But these people who would label themselves as spiritual but not religious, or something similar to that, they believe that the religions that they have been a part of in the past or exposed to in the past, that these religions have done more to hinder their spirituality than to help it. And these religions are seen as a distraction from the experience of the divine and a distraction from the goodness of life itself. And perhaps these religions once had some positive aspects to them, but for the person who is spiritual but not religious, the negatives of institutional religion far outweigh the positives. The bad outweighs the good. These folks are sick. They're sick and tired of stale and worn out dogmas being crammed down their throats, and rightfully so. They're tired of all of the archaic ethics and trauma-inducing codes of conduct that have been hurled upon them. And they're tired of people who talk an awful lot about Jesus, but whose lifestyles look nothing at all like his. Most of all, these people are tired of the narrow-minded and judgmental people who degrade, suppress, and actively oppress others in the name of their religion. So yeah, it's not hard to understand why so many people today have chosen to say goodbye to institutional religion altogether. And I believe that those people who are spiritual but not religious, they have every right to feel the way that they do. And as weird as it may sound as a priest, I know I'm not wearing my collar today, but as weird as it may sound, I will readily confess to all of you that I feel the same way that they do most of the time whenever it comes to religion. Like the prophets of old, this ever-growing group of people has accurately discerned the problem that lies at the heart of so much modern religiosity. They really have. But here's the deal. There's a reason why I have opted not to follow in their footsteps, why I have opted not to leave religion behind, even though I totally sympathize with their concerns. I don't follow these folks because I don't believe that they have actually escaped the problem as much as they think they have. Yes, they have accurately pinpointed the problem outside of themselves, but they have yet to discern that the problem that they have put their finger on, it also exists within themselves, within their own hearts. In other words, you may be able to leave your bad religion behind, but it doesn't mean that the underlying impulse that rests at the heart of your bad religion has left you. Another way of saying it, the person who leaves the pew for good in the name of his spirituality is motivated by the same underlying impulse as the judgmental hypocrite who remains in his pew in the name of his religion. The person who is spiritual but not religious and the bigoted religious observer both suffer from the exact same disease. The symptoms, they just manifest themselves in different ways between the two types of people, just as like the flu would impact people in different ways, right? The problem is that both types of people still cling to their egos. Both have failed to transcend the ego, to transcend the self. Both are motivated more by self-preservation than by self-denial. The hypocrite in the pew wants to use his religion, his tradition, to coddle his own ego, whereas the person who has left the pew behind for good wants to use his spirituality to coddle his ego. Both alike have failed to find self-transcendence in the way of the cross. And Jesus, along with most other major leaders of the major world religions, taught that the only way to find the fullness of life is by giving it up, is through self-denial. We only discover our true selves whenever we choose to empty ourselves in sacrificial, selfless love for others, especially for our enemies. For the mark of a true Christian is love for enemies, not avoidance of enemies. And if you have not noticed by now, going to church gives you plenty of opportunity to practice loving your enemies. It'll give you plenty of opportunity, more than enough. Now, I know somebody might say to me, well, Father, you're not really doing much to sell me on religion. But I'm not trying to. I think most people who leave religion behind, they've had an exaggerated view of what religion is supposed to be all about to begin with. They have this ideal that's up here, and those in the pews can never match that ideal, and so then they leave. But to be quite certain, the church is not a clubhouse for the saints. It's a hospital for broken, sinful people, people like you, people like me. It's a place where people can come who have messy lives, who are still trying to figure themselves out. And the path to spiritual healing and wholeness, it's a bumpy road. It's a bumpy path. But Jesus himself embodied the way. If you will recall, Jesus didn't let himself be crucified by the so-called sinners of his society. No, he let himself be crucified by the reputable members of his own religion. To be clear, this does not at all justify what they did to him, but that's not the point. It's not about what religious people did to him. Rather, it's all about how far his love was willing to go for those religious people, despite all that they did to him. I mean, he prayed for their forgiveness, even as they branded him a heretic and demanded his crucifixion. He prayed that they would be forgiven, even as they were actively crucifying him. This is the way of the cross. And make no mistake about it, Jesus was emphatically clear when he said that students are not above their master. So if the members of his own religion persecuted him, and if you choose to follow Jesus in his way of love, you will also find the members of your own religion seeking to persecute you at some point down the road. And if this never happens to you, you can be sure that you've never actually followed Jesus. My friends, a Christian without a church is a Christ without a cross. And the person who believes that they are spiritual but not religious, actually they are neither. Because in leaving religion behind completely, they have laid down rather than taken up their cross. They have laid down rather than taken up the way to self-transcendence, to self-realization. For the person in the pew next to us is always the cross that we are called to bear. And the bigger the pain in the ass that they are, the greater the need to lovingly take them up. As that ancient saying goes, our brother, our sister, they're the cross that Jesus invites us to take up every single day. Now, of course, the question is, can you decline Jesus' invitation to take up that cross? Of course you can, certainly, but not without imprisoning yourself more deeply within the confines of your own ego. Sure, instead of gathering with other people in prayer and worship on Sunday mornings in a place like this, you can meditate all by yourself, like on your back porch with a cup of coffee in hand. It would be lovely. It'll be blissful. I know that. And if you do this, I have no doubt whatsoever that you will achieve some level of peace within your life And you'll certainly be able to calm the storms of your anxiety, right? It will be helpful. But if you just do this, and that's all you've got going for you, and you don't have something like this place going for you, you will never discover the in-depth transformation that turns people into saints. You'll remain at the base of the mountain in the parking lot. You'll never reach the summit itself. Why? Because saints don't avoid suffering. They don't avoid hard people. They don't avoid hard institutions. Saints don't avoid suffering. They're transformed by it, and they use it to their own advantage. They don't avoid people. They love the worst of sinners and the worst of religious people equally. And they understand that they're enemies, and the church gives us plenty of enemies, does it not? But saints understand that their enemies help them out more than their friends do. A friend makes us lax. That's a good thing. But an enemy always keeps us on our toes, especially whenever it comes to prayer. My friends, the way of the cross involves some level of suffering at the hands of religious people. If you're going to follow Jesus, you cannot avoid it. It's going to happen. And to avoid religious people altogether is to remove yourself from Jesus' way of love. It's that simple. It really is. Now, with all of that said, it's very important. Please listen to me now. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that if you're going to a terrible church that you need to continually submit yourself to abuse, trauma, and oppression. I am not saying that. And I'm not saying that you have to stay in that particular church. If you'll recall, after Jesus rose from the grave, he didn't march himself back down to Jerusalem and start turning tables over at the temple again in order to get himself into trouble all over again. He did not seek crucifixion out a second time. Neither should you. Instead, Jesus found a refuge in a different group of people. So should you. He was crucified by one group, but he appeared in his resurrected form to another group. So should you. If you're suffering in a bad church, it's always a good idea to leave that church. Always. That's God's will for you. Get out. Get the hell out, right? Don't stay. And it may even be a good idea for you to leave the denomination that the church is a part of altogether if it's a bad denomination that oppresses you, right? Or others. But be warned. There's a caution. The moment that you say to yourself, well, all religious people are exactly the same, and you make the decision to leave all religion behind for good because of that conviction, you're only embodying the same judgmental religious attitude that you're trying to escape. You've become the hypocrite in the pew at this point, even if you're not sitting in the pew. Again, you may be able to leave a bad religion behind, but it doesn't mean that bad religion has left you. Friends, the point of all of this is that not all religious people suck. Some of us are actually trying. Are we perfect? No, but we're trying. So find your tribe. Find your place at the table. Find a context that you can find healing in, and whenever you finally do find it, celebrate the crap out of it. Really, you should. And let the blind man from our gospel reading for today be your inspiration. Let him be your patron saint during this season. For he threw himself into the middle of the whole scene, did he not? Such a beautiful reading and a story. He threw aside all caution, all social appropriateness. He threw it all to the wind, and he forced the religious naysayers all around him to deal with the reality of his broken existence. He did not let them hush him into silence. He didn't let himself be another victim of their cold religious ideology and ways. He did not let these religious people convince him that he deserved to remain blind for the rest of his life. Rather, he elbowed his way up to the altar rail. He made them deal with the reality of his existence. He made it all about his healing and not about them and their history with him. And notice what Jesus said to him as he was healed. Go, your faith has made you well. It was his own faith, not any of Jesus' actions, that healed him, according to Jesus. Furthermore, it was not just his faith, but it was his faith to reach out despite religious oppression that healed him. Until millions of people in this country do likewise, they will never find the healing that they're looking for.